I was actually phoned by someone in Toronto who I didn't know, who said he was an agent or an aspiring agent, and he said he had a project, he had a script that was called Spider, and it was based on a novel by Patrick McGrath. And Patrick had written the script, and would I want to see it? And I said, well, you know, usually under these circumstances, since I don't know you, I'd rather not see that script. And of course, that's for the legal complications that can arise when you don't know somebody who sent you a script. But he said, well, you know, it comes with a letter from Ralph Fiennes' agent saying that Ralph wants to play the lead role in this. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you send me the script and that letter, a copy of that letter, and you really do have that letter, then I will read it. Because if it's very rare that an agency, and in this case it was CAA, will actually commit an actor on paper to a project that doesn't have a director, doesn't have financing, doesn't have a schedule, and so on. Sure enough, I got the script, and sure enough, it had the letter. And I was very impressed, both with Ralph and with CAA for, you know, doing that letter. And so I read the script, and by page 2, I thought, well, Ralph has cast himself brilliantly. I really can't actually see anybody else playing this role, literally by page 2. And by the end of the script, I knew I wanted to do it, even though I thought there were some things about the script that I didn't think worked.
I wrote the script 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was in the middle 1990s. And I first met David the summer of 2000. I'd anticipated that we'd have a great deal of work to do together. I'd anticipated that he'd want me to, you know, tear the script to pieces and start all over again. As it happened, the notes he gave me took me about a morning to respond to, at which point he said he was perfectly happy.
I finally found out who the real producer of the movie was. It was Catherine Bailey, who was an English producer of documentaries and radio dramas and theatre in London. And she knew a lot of actors, including Ralph, and that's how Ralph had gotten the script. And apparently had been committed to it for about 4 years before I ever got involved. And I flew to London and met Ralph and met Catherine Bailey, and we just got along fantastically well.
David responded in a very, very passionate way, in the way that Ralph did, which is that he wanted to tell that story as well. So, and I think their responses to it, what ultimately made this film happen, was that we all felt very passionate about it and wanted to do it.
One of the first things that we discussed was who would play the 3 roles that were to be played by the same actress. And I said, well, what about Miranda Richardson? And they said, well, it's amazing that you say that. I said, why is that? And they said, well, we did a reading of the script, just friends, actors, and they said that we asked Miranda to play those roles in that reading. I said, well, was she any good? And they said she was fantastic. So I said, well, then why don't let's get her.
Catherine Bailey, somebody I worked with in her capacity as a radio producer, and she had this dream of making a film with Spider, so it would be her first movie. And Patrick McGrath was very keen to do this, had written a script. Ralph Fiennes was emotionally attached, and she said, I would like you to be involved also, and would you come and do a read-through? So we all went round to Patrick's house, and we had a lovely time when we read the script, and then everything went quite quiet for quite a long time.
It still was to be perhaps a year before we got the film made, because it was very difficult to finance. It was difficult because it's an independent film, and even though we had Ralph and Miranda, and later added Gabriel Byrne, Lynn Redgrave, and John Neville, and so therefore had a fantastic cast, we still could not finance the movie for the $10 million that I thought it had to cost. We could only raise 8. That meant that everybody had to defer their salaries to make, or don't make the movie. That was the choice. So I deferred my salary. Ralph did, Miranda did, Patrick McGrath, the writer, did, Catherine Bailey did, Luke Rogue, another producer, did. We're all still drowning in the deferment pool, you know, waiting for the lifesaver. And if the movie makes some money, we will probably eventually be paid, but there's no guarantee. So in that sense, it's a labor of love, which many independent films end up having to be. As we began to put the financing together and started to go into pre-production, the financing started to fall apart for various reasons. And we had to refinance the film while we were in pre-production, which meant that we had to delay shooting the film while we refinanced. It was very complex because when you change financiers, it means that suddenly you have to redo all the deals that you've done with various distributors all over the world, which is the other part of the financing, is that you sell the film to France, and you sell it to the UK, and you sell it to Spain, and you get guarantees of distribution fees up front, but you don't get the money. You have to take that to various banks. So it's a very complex, and it involves banks in many countries. It gets very complex. And Spider was structured as a Canada-UK co-production. So that also meant that two governments were involved, the British government and the Canadian government, because government agencies were involved in giving you tax breaks and giving you investment money as well. So when we had to dismantle all of this and redo all the contracts while we were, having sets built and so on, it's very stressful. And I had to fly back to Toronto from London and wait and see if we were really going to do the movie and hope that we weren't going to lose anybody. And we almost lost Miranda. Finally, when we did get back to London and start shooting, we still didn't have the money flowing. So it was incredibly difficult. After 3 weeks of shooting in London, which was all we did there, we did exteriors mostly, no one had been paid yet. None of the crew had been paid for all the weeks of prep and for the 3 weeks of shooting. And in Toronto, where I've worked with the same basic crews for many years, I could perhaps ask for some favors, but in London I knew nobody, and they would have had every justification for walking off the set. So we never knew when we were coming to the set if there was actually going to be a set there. But they didn't. They hung in. And they had all been working on things like Harry Potter, and they were very excited to be working on something quite different. And so, although there was a little bit of grumbling, and why not, no one left. And we left Catherine Bailey behind as a kind of a hostage so when we flew to Canada, so that the UK crew would know that we were, ultimately they were going to get paid. And Catherine was, very rigorous about the integrity of the production and made sure that everybody was taken care of before she came over to Canada for the 5 weeks of shooting that we did there. So it was heaven and hell, the financing was hell, and the shooting, the artistic part, being on the set was absolute heaven. There are times when you're doing movies where it's the complete reverse. So if I have to choose, I'm going to take this combination, definitely.